tomorrow's exam is 9 to 11. So, and I have given the chart of sitting in RM 101, KD 101, and KD 102. So, anyway, so today maybe we'll have a shorter class because I just wanted to summarize what we have been doing through the semester, and just to give you an idea about what it is that is expected of you to have learned, right. So, first thing is that many times we think about cyber security, we think about malware, and we also think about intrusion detection, or we think about specific vulnerabilities, right. So, we think about buffer overflow or privilege escalation, we think about web application vulnerabilities such as cross-site scripting, or we think of CSRF or SQL injection, command injection, this kind of stuff, right, or we think about DDoS. But what I wanted people to understand, students to understand, is that attackers, especially attackers who work in groups supported by often by criminal gangs or nation states, etc., they actually plan much bigger than what you would think, that exploiting a command injection or exploiting an remote code execution vulnerability or buffer overflow vulnerability. They actually use that as a first step to get their first payload into execution, and then they actually do various things, lateral movements, they do privilege escalation, they do data collection, they do credential harvesting, they do final impact, for example, like encryption of your data or your files, or wiping your files, or exfiltrating your files, and so on. So therefore, we have to think in terms of cyber attacks more like a it's a sequence of activities that starts with the reconnaissance activity, as well as maybe based on reconnaissance some weaponization activities, right. So, you weaponize the weaknesses in the target system, and you create exploits, or you create social engineering collaterals, and then you actually get into the system. So, when you do that, you remember that either you exploit weakness in the software, or maybe also hardware, not so common, but also in hardware, firmware, etc., or you exploit weakness in the people, right. So, remember, this is we have been saying many times that cyber security is about people, process, and technology, and sometimes it may be weaknesses in the process, right. So, the example we talked about, that Sarah Palin's Yahoo email getting hacked, Yahoo account getting hacked, or somebody's Matt Dogan's this Apple account, Amazon account getting hacked, and so on. These are basically business process that were weak, that were not thinking in terms of various possible ways of exploitation or threats. So you can have these weaknesses in the in your software, hardware, firmware, etc., or you can have your weaknesses in your infrastructure. For example, you can have a DNS, your DNS local DNS resolver might have been attacked, and a SBI's URL may be translated to an IP address which is under control of an attacker, right. And then somebody goes into SBI website, and then the local resolver says that, okay, I have the SBI's SBI dot whatever com URL translation already in my cache, so I am going to give it to him. When he goes there, he is actually seeing a website that looks like SBI, so he types in his username, password, and gets his credential compromised, and from there things go on. Now in case of Indian banks, it's slightly better because we have also two-factor issue, but then two-factor has been compromised in the recent times, like recently Duo has been compromised, Okta has been compromised. So this two-factor compromise also is not uncommon, but in any case nobody is claiming that any of the protection mechanism that you use is going to be 100%. So it is always about reducing the probability of getting attacked. So you do two-factor, you do not give up on two-factor just because there has been some attacks on two-factor, because two-factor still reduces the probability of getting compromised through your user account, right. So that's so in any case, so the idea is that you have to understand this reconnaissance to weaponization to initial access to execution to privilege escalation or persistence, lateral movement, collection, exfiltration, and all this stuff, right. Also, you have to understand that how these tactics are implemented. So there are certain, now of course there are almost 200 techniques and so on. You cannot be doing all of them, you cannot be knowing all of them, but at least you have some idea that what are these techniques that can be used for implementing a particular tactic. And then so you have to also understand the kill chains, right. So we talked about the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which is the earliest kill chain that was there, but that has only 7 different phases, which is rather simplified, and then we talked about unified kill chain, which is a little more elaborate, and which basically is post ATT&CK. So it talks about these various phases that are related to ATT&CK. It also kind of gives you a little more nuanced way of doing this attacks, repeating certain tactics through the kill chain and so on. So now we also saw that when we look at an attack forensic, we look at the forensic information about an attack either by reading a threat report or by looking at the raw data, that is the logs and other things that we see, we can kind of guess what TTPs are being used, or we can kind of surmise what TTPs are being used, and then we can also give defensive recommendation that next time, so that that particular technique cannot be successful if we do this, right. So this kind of defensive recommendation from the TTPs that has been applied to your system by an attacker is one way of thinking in terms of defense, right. So that is how you improve the defense of your system. And also defense is one thing that one has to understand is that defense is not always about adding a new rule in the firewall or adding endpoint security tools or adding network intrusion detection or adding antivirus or just adding stronger authentication, access control, this kind of stuff. These are necessary but not sufficient. Sometimes you have to also think in terms of people and processes. For example, in one of the committees I was listening to this particular financial organization who had an attack in the following way. So I might have said this to, in class before, that one employee who left 2 years ago, his account was still there, and in his account in the recycle bin he had left a malware, and then that malware was activated through another channel, and that is how the attack happened, right. So this is a process problem, right. So when an employee is terminated or an employee leaves, you need to immediately recycle, reclaim the account and delete all the account files and everything and cleanse this disk space and all that stuff. If you leave it around, then many things can happen. So, in the Maruchishire sewage plant, the attack that happened in 1990 in Australia. So, there there was a disgruntled contractor who actually was let go in the company, but his account was not terminated. And this is 1990, so there was no two-factor authentication, and you probably used dial-up modem to contact the system. And so he dialed up, and then he did the setting such that there was a huge spillage of sewage, right. So, that is not a well, that in one sense it is a failure of the process, and because this is an HR process problem, right. So, security can actually happen from HR process weaknesses, right. So, therefore, you have to understand that it is not only about cleaning up malware or cleaning up or blocking connection requests and so on. It is also you have to have the right set of processes and so on. So, beyond Lockheed Martin kill chain, we talked about unified kill chain, and you have to also understand that how these things interact, like ATT&CK and the kill chain concept, because ATT&CK does not imply any sequence. ATT&CK is about the various tactics. There are 14 tactics. Within each tactics there are many techniques and procedures, but they do not imply a particular sequencing of the tactics. Kill chains do imply sequencing, right. And then you have to understand the defend framework, right. So, the question is that if I am a cybersecurity professional and I have been called in as a consultant to an organization, how am I going to, I have to start somewhere, right. So, what do I do, right. So, all these frameworks and standards are actually way of wrapping your head around the problem of organizing cybersecurity of an organization. So, you can go ahead in many different ways, right. So, you can use NIST CSF framework to frame your activities, or you can go by MITRE defend framework, or you can go by other things like standards like ISO 27001, etc. But what the NIST defend framework tells you is that you have to be able to do hardening, right. So, understanding hardening, how do you harden applications, how do you harden the network, how do you harden the credentials and so on. These are very important part of understanding how the cyber security is has to be thought about, right. So, what should I do if I am gone into a consultant, gone as a consultant, what should I do? Like I should ask them about, first thing I will ask them about is how much hardening they have done, right, and I will tell them that, okay, so have you done this and have you done that and have you done this other thing, and then they will say, okay, we have done this, but we have not done that. Then I can tell them that, okay, this is something you have to do. I also have to tell them, okay, how to go about detection, right. So, many organizations do not do much about detection, right. So, they do not have a SIEM or SOC, or they do not have an endpoint security solution in place. So, detection is actually often only done post facto, right. So, when logs are looked at, when something happened and then you look at the log and you detect that, oh, at this point in time there was some some malicious payload was sent to so and so IP address and so on and so forth, but that is not good enough, right. So, you have to be able to detect before it hits the target, right. So, detection, for detection we will talk about, like, okay, so do you do network intrusion detection, do you do endpoint detection, are you actually trying to detect what's happening in your DNS traffic and what's happening in your routing traffic and so on. So, detection is important. Then isolation, like how do you isolate critical applications, right. So, applications like if you are running the non-critical and critical applications on the same machine, then if the non-critical application gets attacked, then critical application will suffer, right. So, you have to do isolation. So, what are the different isolation techniques? What is the use of deception techniques, right. So, honeypots and honey credentials and so on. And then eviction, how do you evict and a compromised when a system is found to be compromised or a particular credential has been compromised. And restoration, like if you are wiped or if you are encrypted, how to use the backup for restoration and so on. So, this is one way of thinking how to go about giving minimal cyber security for an organization. It is not necessarily 100%. Also remember that this is not necessarily based on things like risk assessment, right. So, we said okay, so I do not have infinite budget. So, I have to be able to use my budget to do cyber security to maximize the utility, maximize the effectiveness. So, I have to be able to do risk assessment, and then based on the risk I may have to do higher security level at some particular asset or some network segment and lower security in certain segments and so on. So, and then make sure that the lower security segment is cannot access the higher security segment without going through proper access control and so on. So, that part is not there in the defend framework. Defend framework basically kind of gives you a list of things that you should do. So, if I am a cybersecurity consultant going to an organization, I will certainly use defend to tell them a laundry list of things that they should do, and if they haven't done it, then I will tell them to do it. But that is not enough, because now they cannot do this uniformly across their entire infrastructure, because their entire infrastructure may be too large. So, you need to do risk assessment to figure out which part of the infrastructure requires better security and which part does not. So, risk assessment is basically about budget constrained cyber defense planning, whereas MITRE defend is a unconstrained cyber defense planning. And then risk assessment has important part like asset management, vulnerability management and threat intelligence, which are also not exactly focused in the defend framework. So, this is these components have to be understood. The next thing is about resilience, right. So, resilience is different from robustness or reliability, right. So, reliability is about how what is the mean time to failure gives you a sense of reliability, right. So, if your system fails does not fail 99.999% time, then you say it's reliability up to 4 nines, right. So, robustness is about withstanding attacks without failing, right. So, for example, if you have a robust to DDoS attacks, then you can handle probably gigabps or even higher, tens of or hundreds of gigabps traffic, and you will not shut down or will not collapse. Resilience on the other hand is different from robustness and reliability, and resilience is about accepting that when the attack is too much or attack is too virulent, you can actually degrade your performance, you can degrade your service level agreement, but then you will recover and you will recover fast, right. So, this elasticity is about resilience. So, understanding that resilience is important, and why in cybersecurity people are talking about resilience is because nobody can guarantee 100% security, nobody can guarantee full robustness, right, 100% robustness. But what they can do is that plan for this kind of extreme events where they have to degrade their performance or degrade their service level agreement, and then come back up as soon as possible, as soon as the attack kind of ceases to be applied. So then in cyber resilience, you have various maturity levels, right. So we discussed about various maturity levels from MIL 0 to MIL 5, and we said that, if you are MIL 3, this is what it means, and if you are MIL 5, this is what it means. And what we have to understand is that why is it that MIL 5 is better than MIL 4? Is it just in what way is it better? Why do I have to target MIL 5 rather than MIL 4 or MIL 3, right? So this kind of understanding is required, and also the 10 domains that we talked about in the CRR model, like asset management to vulnerability management to third party, or what we call the external dependency management and so on. All these different domains, we have to understand what they are, what functions we expect from them, and then what kind of maturity we expect from them. So that is the resilience thing. We also discussed a little bit about NIST CSF 1.1, and we talked about 5 functions. NIST CSF 2.0 has 6 functions, but we talk about 5 functions, that is identify, protect, detect, respond and recover. And then we talked about this implementation tiers, right. So risk aware and ad hoc and so on and so forth. So what are these implementation tiers? Why would I want to be in a certain implementation tier versus another implementation tier? And then there are framework profiles, right. What are these framework profiles? So NIST CSF is another way of, if I go to consult an organization, I might say, okay, so what is your identify function? Do you identify risks, right? Do you identify your assets? Do you identify your threats, right? And how do you do that? What is it that you are doing? Show me, how you did their last risk assessment, right? So this is what I'll do, right? Then I'll say, okay, so here is so your identify function has this problems. Then I'll say, okay, let me see what you do for protection, right? So do you have strong access control? Do you have strong authentication? Do you have network segmentation? Do you have firewalls? Show me your firewall rules and so on. So I will check what are they doing for protection. Then I'll say, okay, so protection has these problems, but you should fix it. Now let's see how do you detect, and what is your detection rate, and what are your detection rules? Do you use AI ML for detection and all kinds of stuff? And then I'll go back, from detection I'll go to respond. I want to understand their incident response mechanism. Do you have a SOC? In the SOC, what kind of use cases do you have? How do you escalate incidents to higher level and so on and so forth. So I'll ask them all these questions. Then I'll go into their recovery, how they recover, do they do proper backup and so on. So these frameworks give you a good idea on how to go about understanding an organizational security posture, or to advise them about their security posture, and for implementer, how to implement, what to implement rather, right? What to implement and so on. They also can talk to tool vendors. When they talk to tool vendors will try to sell you whatever they want to sell, right? So you may not need it. You may already have that function already in some other tool, right? So this kind of clarity is required, and this clarity will come from understanding these frameworks and so on. The next one that we also discussed is the threat intelligence sharing, and then machine readable threat intelligence, or MRTI, and in that STIX 2.1 as one of the standard data model for for capturing threat intelligence and sharing threat intelligence. So this is something that is we have to understand, because this is now very common. Even the regulators like CERT-In and NCIPC, etc., they share STIX threat intelligence with the regulated organizations, and those are consumed by their various tools And then finally, we discussed about the SCAP, the Security Content Automation Protocol, and its component standards like CVE, CCE, CPE, XCCDF, OVAL and CVSS, and then what these things are, what is their use, you know, when you encountered them in real life in various reports and so on, you understand what they are, and then you can get some idea. So with this topics, I am hoping that you are in a good shape to be ahead of your peers if you join cybersecurity team of an organization. You will have understanding and know-how of majority of the activities a cybersecurity team would undertake, and you can use this knowledge to get ahead in a cybersecurity career and take interest in specific aspects. So eventually, you will become specialized in something, and normally nobody will remain specialized all their life, 30-year, 40-year career on one thing, right. So they might start with risk assessment, may move on to resilience, they might move to threat intelligence and things like that. So it doesn't have to be like a lifelong commitment to any of these, but once you excel in one, then you go to the next one, and then you eventually get promoted, and eventually you will become CISO, right. So your goal would be to eventually, if you choose a industry career in cybersecurity, you want to be CISO, right. So or at least you could use this knowledge to decide whether even you want to do this, right. You may not want to do this, right. So this is hopefully this will give you an idea about whether this is something you like or not. So that's it, and from what I just told you, you know, you should get an idea about what will be in your final exam. And any questions? What's that? Oh, what I missed in the class? Well, compared to the last time I offered this class, this time I did not miss anything. In fact, I did more. I could do SCAP, you know, I could not do last time for some reason. I forgot why. But I think that I could have probably done a slightly more if I could cover like a standard at least 27001, you know, some or 62446 standard. That would have been nice, because we talked about a lot of standards, but we haven't looked at a standard. So you know, how to look at a standard and understand how to implement it, or what an auditor, like if I claim to be a 27001 compliant, then what an auditor will come and check. This kind of thing may be also useful knowledge in this, but we haven't had the chance to cover that. There are several reasons. One is, of course, I got sick quite a bit in this semester, but bigger issue is that nobody comes to class. You don't feel enthused to do something, you know, and this is something that actually the class before me is a math class. Actually, ordinary differential equations, right? It's a required class for first year students, I believe. And I saw 7-8 students, and I assume that there should be 200 students in such a class, right? So I think that there is a problem post COVID, students don't know how to attend classes, because I have never had so few students in class throughout the semester, right? So this class has had on an average, I think we had about 20 students out of 83 students, right? And that is obviously a problem, because first of all, you know, if the students don't come to class, you don't, you're always worried that your message is not going through, right? So in this class, at least we had a recording of the classes. So some students might be actually watching them before exam or for something, I don't know. But most classes will not even have that, right? So I don't know how the situation is in other classes, but from the math class I saw, it was it was quite scary. Because I stood there several days and the teacher was teaching very well. So, I do not understand if it's not like the teacher was not teaching well. So, or maybe the students all know how to solve such differential equations. I do not know what was going on, but it was situation is pretty bad. And as you know that we have big debate around the country about the number of unplaced people in from IITs. So, I do not know if you know that even the top 5 IITs have 30 to 40% unplaced this year, right. And what that also means is that there is also an issue about AI, Copilot and all that stuff easing the job of programming and so on. So, one major problem in IIT system now is that 90% of the students go into IT, irrespective of what subject they are studying, right. Now, that means that a country cannot proceed just you know a country cannot progress just by IT people, right. There has to be core engineering, right, and core engineers are not there because everybody is going into IT. I think that thing will reverse soon, and then these students who actually did not learn their core engineering, chasing data structure course and machine learning courses, will be actually underqualified for their core engineering. I think there is a huge problem that is going to come up in the next few years. But in any case, I think I have a hypothesis, and I do not know the truth of that. I do not have enough data to prove it, but I have a hypothesis that the students we are seeing now in the undergraduate or even graduate, they spend majority of their high school etc. online education because of COVID. So, they do not know what it means to sit in a classroom and listen and try to understand and ask questions and interact and so on. So, this is going to be maybe a problem for the next several years. Maybe it will affect a generation of students. Anyway, so I think I am done with this class. So, good luck tomorrow for your exam, and then have a good summer, and we will see you maybe in another class.